Have you ever opened your eyes in the middle of the night and realized you were awake, but your body didn't respond? I'm not talking about laziness, it's not fatigue. It's something different, an invisible weight, crushing your chest while you struggle to breathe. For a few seconds that feel like an eternity, you are no longer the owner of your own body. You can feel, you can see, but you can't escape. Some say this is just a sleep disorder, but I've seen what really happens when you're trapped in bed. And it has nothing to do with medicine or science. It's about something most people prefer to ignore until it's too late. In the stories you're about to hear, you'll meet men who faced nights like this and lived to tell the tale. Each of them from a different city, but all with one thing in common: a presence, a force, a being that refuses to let them wake up and be free. As you listen, ask yourself, what if that presence is closer than you think? Maybe right there, in the dark corner of your room. If this story has already sent chills down your spine, I recommend you like this video now, share it with someone who needs to know, and subscribe to the channel, because what I'm about to tell you will not let you sleep peacefully tonight. I never believed in legends. I was never the kind of man who gets impressed by old stories, especially the ones that feel made to scare tourists. But when I accepted a job in Salem, Massachusetts, and rented an old wooden house built in the 19th century, every neighbor gave me the same advice, some smiling, others with an expression far too serious to be a joke. If you hear something at night, don't look. During the first few days, I ignored it. It was just folklore, I thought. But there's something strange about this town, a silence that feels like the air itself is carrying memories of something that was never forgotten. The streets empty early, and there's a smell of damp wood that never really goes away. When night falls, the houses groan and creak as if they're breathing. One October night, just before Halloween, I woke up suddenly. There was no bad dream, no loud noise, just the disturbing feeling that I wasn't alone in the room. That's when I felt the cold, not the usual chill you get when the window's left open. This was a cold that seemed to come from inside my own body, as if my blood had turned to ice. My heart beat slow, almost heavy, and each breath felt like a struggle. The first thing I saw was the digital clock on the nightstand, 3:12 a.m. The red glow of the numbers seemed more intense than usual, casting just enough light to outline the furniture in the room. Everything else was swallowed by a thick, almost solid darkness. That's when I heard it, a faint low sound scratching from the ceiling directly above my bed. At first I thought it was my imagination, but no, it came again, slow, deliberate. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Each scratch lasted longer than the last, as if something was moving carefully, dragging itself across the wood. My body tensed, but my mind tried to be logical. Maybe it was a rat or a branch scraping the roof because of the wind. Only there was no wind that night, and the ceiling was far too high for any tree branches to reach. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Not gradually, it just stopped, as if whatever it was knew I was awake and was listening to me breathe. That's when I felt something I'd never experienced before, an invisible weight pressing down on me, not physically but psychologically. It was the indescribable sensation of being watched, and not from afar but close, like a pair of eyes hidden in the darkness, fixed on me, waiting for me to move. I didn't know whether I should turn on the light or stay perfectly still. My mind screamed for me to act, but my body refused. Some deep, primal part of me knew that if I made any sudden move, something terrible would happen. I lay there, frozen, my heartbeat slowly quickening. And then as I heard it, no more scratching, just a single, sharp crack like wood snapping, followed by absolute silence. But the cold didn't leave. At that moment, I didn't know it yet, but that night was only the beginning, and something in Salem already knew my name. I should have turned on the light. That was the first thought that crossed my mind. But before I could move a single muscle, I realized I couldn't. It was as if my entire body had been submerged in wet cement. My head, my arms, my legs, Nothing responded. The only thing I could move were my eyes, and even they felt unbearably heavy. The air felt different, colder and heavier. Every time I tried to inhale, it was like breathing through a straw, with a crushing weight pressing harder and harder on my chest. My heart was racing, not from physical effort, but from a growing, uncontrollable terror. That's when I noticed it. On the ceiling, directly above my bed, there was a shadow. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light and darkness, cast by the narrow gap in the curtain and the distant glow of a street lamp outside. But it wasn't still. It moved. The shape was human, but wrong. The arms, if you could even call them arms, were far too long, stretching out to the sides like the legs of a spider. The shadow didn't just cling to the ceiling. It seemed fused to it, as if gravity had no claim over that thing. And then it moved again, slowly, just enough for me to see that it was descending, inch by inch, as if it were studying me. My entire body screamed to react, but nothing worked, not even my voice. I tried to scream, but no sound came out, only a choked, muffled rasp, as if invisible hands were wrapped tightly around my throat. The eyes, that's when I saw them. Two dull points of light emerged in the middle of that darkness. It wasn't a bright glow, more like the faint reflection you see when light catches an animal's eyes in the dark. But these eyes, they were locked on mine. I didn't blink, I couldn't. And as the thing drew closer, the air grew heavier, the cold deepened, and a sickening, almost tangible feeling spread over me. The feeling that this thing was happy to see me. In that moment, I understood I wasn't just dreaming, and this wasn't some ordinary sleep paralysis episode. There was something here, something that could see me, recognize me, and wanted to reach me, and it was succeeding. The silence that took over the room wasn't just the absence of sound. It was as if the night itself had stopped to watch what was about to happen. The thing on the ceiling was now so close that I could feel its presence as a physical weight in the air, a weight that seeped into me, crushing any thought of escape. And then it moved again, faster this time, an almost imperceptible shift, but enough for its body, or what looked like a body, to tilt directly over me. The distance between us shrank to less than a meter. The cold grew worse. It was no longer just discomfort, it was pain. My skin began to tingle, as if tiny ice needles were piercing every pore. My breathing became shallow, and I had the sickening sensation that the air I was pulling in wasn't enough to keep me alive. That's when I felt it. Something touched my foot. It wasn't like a human touch. There was no warmth, no normal pressure. It was as if the darkness itself had taken shape, sliding across my skin slowly, deliberately. The contact traveled up my leg, toward my knee, and with every inch it climbed, I felt more paralyzed inside. The eyes, those two dull, inhuman points, brightened slightly, as if the creature was much pleased. A low sound, somewhere between a growl and a deep whisper, began to vibrate through the air. It wasn't coming from its mouth. It was coming from the entire room, as if the walls themselves were transmitting that frequency. The pressure on my chest increased. Now I could hear my own heartbeat, not as a normal rhythm, but as a slow drum, each beat more spaced out than the last. My vision began to narrow, and for a moment I thought I was about to black out. Then something changed. The creature leaned even closer, until its face, or the lack of one, was just inches from mine. The closeness revealed details I wish I had never seen. An irregular texture, like charred flesh mixed with liquid shadows, and a smell that nearly made me gag. It was the stench of rotting wood, rusted metal, and something dead. I wanted to close my eyes, but I couldn't. I wanted to turn my head, but my body refused to obey. Then, in one swift motion, it opened what seemed to be a mouth. But it wasn't like ours. It was a deep vertical slit running down the center of what should have been its head. Inside there were no teeth, only an absolute endless void, a void that pulled, and for a moment I felt my very breath being sucked into it. The cold had settled deep into my bones, as if I had been lying in the snow for hours. The thing above me was so close I could hear it, not breathing but producing a faint, sickly sound, like wet fabric being slowly torn apart. Its eyes, dull yet unwavering, never blinked. I remembered the words the locals had told me on my first day here. If you hear something at night, don't look. But I had looked, and now I understood why they called it a rule. The thought of dying here, helpless and silent, began to suffocate me more than the creature's weight. Something inside me, a desperate, primal will, screamed for me to do something. I fought against the paralysis. At first, nothing happened, but I felt the tiniest twitch in my right hand. The creature's head tilted sharply at the movement, its body stiffening like a predator spotting prey. It knew. My hand slid toward the nightstand inch by inch, fingers brushing against the cold metal base of the lamp. I wrapped my fingers around it, forcing my frozen muscles to obey. With a final surge of effort, I swung the lamp upward, aiming at the thing's face. The reaction was immediate. It released a sound that was not of this world, a deafening, shrill wail mixed with a deep guttural rumble that seemed to shake the air itself. The walls trembled, the temperature plummeted, and the lights in the room flickered violently. The void in its mouth opened wider, pulling at everything, the air, the shadows, even the heat from my body. I felt my chest cave in as if my very soul was being drawn out. And then it moved, not away from me, but into me. The darkness poured downward like a flood, engulfing my face, sliding over my eyes and mouth, smothering me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't see. I couldn't even hear my own thoughts anymore. There was only the cold, and the sound of that inhuman wail echoing inside my skull. I don't know how long I was trapped in that void. It could have been seconds or hours. All that existed was cold, darkness, and that sound, not coming from outside but from inside my own head. An endless scream, high-pitched and low at the same time, as if two inhuman voices overlapped in perfect, unbearable harmony. Then, silence. When my eyes opened, I was lying on the bedroom floor. The lamp was on its side next to me. The bulb shattered, shards of glass scattered across the carpet. The pale light of dawn filtered through the curtains, revealing an ordinary room, empty. For a moment, I tried to convince myself it had all been a nightmare. But then I noticed something. My feet, they were ice cold, as if they'd been submerged in freezing water for hours. The skin was pale, mottled with dark stains running up to my knees. They weren't ordinary bruises. They were marks, long, like fingers. I looked up at the ceiling. The wooden boards still creaked faintly, but not because of the wind. Right there, directly above my bed, something had been carved into the wood, 4 deep, parallel grooves, scorched into the surface. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. In the darkest corner of the room, where the morning light couldn't reach, there was a shadow, still, tall, and staring directly at me. I blinked. It didn't disappear. It just smiled, not with a mouth or teeth, but with its eyes. 2 dull, unmoving points of light, gleaming as if they knew this wasn't over. And deep down, I knew it wasn't. When I moved to New Orleans, I thought I was ready for the city. I'd always been fascinated by its darker side. Jazz playing on street corners, historic cemeteries, alleys lit by old lamps, and of course, the stories of voodoo. But until that autumn, it was all just folklore and tourist curiosity. I rented a small apartment in the French Quarter, on the top floor of a building over 100 years old. The floorboards creaked under my feet, and the windows let in the damp wind from the Mississippi. The neighbors were friendly, but they all repeated the same thing whenever I mentioned working late. Avoid coming home after 3 in the morning. That night, I worked later than usual. I got home just before 3, exhausted but strangely restless. The air was heavy, thick with humidity. I left the window open to air out the room and lay down. It was in the middle of the night that I noticed it. I woke up to a strong smell invading the room. It wasn't cigarette smoke, and it wasn't burnt food. It was the smell of herbs, burning, a dense, almost sweet aroma, but with a bitter undertone that scratched the back of my throat. I opened my eyes and realized the room was darker than it should have been, as if the street light outside had gone out. My ears picked up something beyond the silence, a muffled, repetitive sound, like the slow beat of a distant drum. I sat up in bed and looked toward the window. The street below was empty, but the smell at it was stronger, as if someone were burning it right beneath my window. And for a moment, I swear I saw a shadow crossing the alley, tall, wearing something that swayed in the wind. But there was no wind at all. The drumbeat stopped, the smell remained, and suddenly I realized it wasn't coming from outside. The aroma was inside my room, and I wasn't alone. I should have closed the window. That was the first thought that crossed my mind when I woke up suddenly. Lying on my back, staring at the ceiling, there was no wind, yet the curtains swayed as if something had just passed by the window or come through it. I tried to turn my head to look, but I couldn't. My arms and legs were pinned down, as if glued to the mattress. My chest rose and fell quickly, but each breath felt shorter than the last. The smell of burning herbs was still there, strong, almost suffocating. It seemed to seep into my lungs and spread through my body like a living smoke. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. In the right-hand corner of the room, between the window and the wardrobe, a female figure stood in the shadows. Tall, thin, wearing what looked like a dress made of multiple layers of dark fabric. Her neck was covered in dozens of necklaces, colorful beads, medals, small bones, and something that looked disturbingly like human teeth. She didn't move, but I could hear a low rhythmic sound, a murmur in a language I didn't recognize. Each word seemed to vibrate in the air, as if it was meant to bypass my ears and go straight into my mind. My eyes tried to focus on her face. At first it was blurred, as if covered by an invisible veil, but slowly her features began to form. Dark, wrinkled skin, eyes set too deep into her skull, and a smile that didn't belong on any human face. She took a step forward. The sound of the beads clinking against her chest echoed in the silence of the room. With each step, the smell of the herbs grew stronger, and my vision began to darken at the edges, as if the room itself was closing in on me. When she stopped, she was less than a meter from my bed. She leaned forward, and her eyes, two black pits, locked onto mine. And for the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty that what was staring at me was not human. She kept staring at me for what felt like an eternity. I could feel the weight of that gaze not just on my body, but deep inside my mind, as if she were probing through every thought, every memory. The murmuring she had been chanting grew louder, faster, as if building toward some kind of final invocation. Then, she began to move. She didn't walk like an ordinary person. Her feet slid across the floor, barely lifting, as if pulled forward by some invisible thread. The sound of beads knocking against her chest blended with the faint, brittle crack of the tiny bones strung among them. When she reached the side of my bed, the smell of burning herbs became suffocating. My lungs burned. I felt a pressure in my temples, as if my skull were being squeezed from the inside. She extended her hand. The skin was thin, almost translucent, revealing dark veins that pulsed slowly beneath the surface. Her fingers were far too long, each ending in a thick yellowed nail curved downward. When her hand touched my chest, I felt no warmth. I felt a cutting cold that sank through my skin and spread into my bones. My heart began to race, and each beat felt weaker than the last. Her eyes came so close to mine that there was nothing else, only that endless blackness swallowing me whole. She began whispering directly into my ear. The words were incomprehensible, but they had a physical effect, a tingling at the back of my neck, shivers crawling up my spine, and a strange numbness spreading through my hands. That's when I realized she wasn't just looking at me, she was entering. With every syllable, my mind sank deeper into some dark, bottomless place. My thoughts were no longer mine. My body no longer belonged to me, and I knew that if she wanted to, I would never wake up again. I knew I couldn't move, but something inside me, maybe fear, maybe pure survival, began to fight against that invisible weight. My body was still trapped, but I felt a small twitch in the finger of my right hand. The woman noticed. Her eyes narrowed, and for an instant, the murmuring stopped. It was as if she had sensed my attempt to resist, and she didn't like it. The pressure on my chest increased. I could feel her nails almost piercing my skin, a cold that seeped into my ribs. But at the same time, the numbness in my hands began to fade. I could move my wrist. Slowly, forcing every muscle, I managed to slide my hand across the sheet toward the nightstand. My fingers fumbled blindly until they found what I was looking for, a small candle and a box of matches. She tilted her head in an unnatural way, like an animal studying its prey. Her necklaces clinked softly, and the smell of burning herbs grew even stronger and almost acidic. With every ounce of strength I could gather, I struck the match. The flame flared, casting full light on her face. What I saw was not human. Her skin looked cracked like charred wood, and deep within those cracks, something moved, something alive, crawling beneath the flesh. Her eyes, once only black pits, now caught the light like an animal's, revealing a feverish, hungry gleam. She released a sound that wasn't a scream. It was a mixture of a human voice and a beast's roar, loud enough to vibrate inside my skull. The entire room seemed to tremble. The walls groaned, and then, as if made of smoke, she hurled herself onto me. The flame went out, and I was swallowed by darkness. When I opened my eyes, the first thing I felt was the cold air. It wasn't the damp, heavy cold of a New Orleans night. It was a dry, cutting cold, the kind that made me think of the inside of a tomb. I was on the bedroom floor. The mattress had been pushed aside, as if someone or something had dragged me. The spent match lay next to me, burned all the way down. For a few seconds, I thought I had survived a nightmare, but then I realized the smell of burning herbs was still there, weaker now, but persistent, soaked into the walls and the air. I looked down at my arms and saw marks, not scratches, not ordinary bruises, but thin, long, parallel impressions, as if frozen fingers had gripped me tightly. That's when I heard it, a faint clinking sound. The beads. It was coming from somewhere inside the apartment, but I couldn't tell where. I stood slowly, and that's when I noticed the curtains were completely drawn, blocking out any light from outside. In the darkest corner of the room, the shadows seemed thicker, almost solid, and then I saw them. Two dim points of light appeared within the blackness, small opaque reflections, like eyes watching me. The clinking of the beads grew louder, and a voice, low, distant but unmistakable, whispered my name. I blinked. The darkness was empty, or maybe it had simply moved to a place where I couldn't see it. When I moved to San Antonio, I wasn't expecting to find anything beyond hot weather and stories about the Old West, but I soon realized the city hides a darker side, buried in its silent streets and in the old buildings that have somehow survived time. I had rented a small house near the historic center. The street was quiet, lit by short lampposts and lined with trees that cast strange shadows on the walls at night. The rent was far too cheap for the location, but I didn't question it. All I wanted was a place to rest. On the third night, I woke to a sound that seemed to come from inside the house. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but when I lay still and listened, I heard it clearly. Footsteps. They weren't hurried steps. They were slow, rhythmic, as if someone were walking barefoot across the wooden floor. The sound came from the hallway, drawing closer and closer to my bedroom. My body tensed. I glanced at the clock on the nightstand, 3:03 a.m. The silence between each step was so deep I could hear my own quickening breath. By instinct, I reached toward the lamp beside the bed, but before my fingers touched it, the footsteps stopped. The house fell into complete silence, and in that silence, I noticed something even more unsettling. The air had changed. It was colder, heavier, as if it had been drained from the room. I looked toward the door. It was slightly ajar, and the hallway beyond it seemed darker than it should have been. Much darker. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move out there, slowly passing in front of the gap. And even without seeing a face, I knew with absolute certainty that it was looking right at me. I was still staring at the door when my body locked up. It wasn't just fear, it was physical, as if every muscle had been given the order to shut down all at once. My hands fell limply onto the sheets. My legs felt as heavy as lead. The air grew colder, not just uncomfortable, the kind of cold that burns, that stings the skin like dry ice. My breathing became shallow, and the sound of my heartbeat seemed to echo inside my head. Then I saw him. The figure was standing in the hallway just beyond the crack of the door. I couldn't make out a face, only a tall, thin silhouette, shrouded in a hood that completely hid any detail. It seemed to wear a long, dark cloak that shifted ever so slightly, even though there was no wind. He didn't enter. He just stood there, motionless, as if waiting for something. Then he began to move, one slow step, then another, closer and closer, until the shadow crossed the threshold and entered the room, carrying with it an even heavier, almost tangible silence. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My eyes were the only part of me that could still move. I followed the outline of that figure as it approached the side of my bed. Then he leaned in, slowly, so close that the shadow of the hood fell completely over my face. There was no breath, no smell, only emptiness, as if inside that hood there was absolutely nothing. And in that moment, I felt a strange, horrible certainty that whatever was standing before me then wasn't just looking, it was choosing me. He remained leaning over me for a few seconds that felt like minutes. I could sense that there was something inside that hood, but it wasn't a face. It was as if the darkness itself had taken shape, dense, pulsing, alive. Then he moved. A hand, or what looked like a hand, slowly emerged from within the cloak. It had no clear color. It was a mixture of shadow and flesh, with fingers far too long and thin to be human. When it touched my ankle, a sharp cold shot up my entire leg. It was as if the temperature of my blood had dropped instantly. The touch wasn't gentle. It gripped, as if testing the strength of my bones. The hooded figure made no sound, but I felt something worse, a crushing psychological weight, as if my mind were being squeezed. Strange images began to flash in my head, places I had never seen, people I didn't know, all of them wearing the same expression of pure terror, staring at the very same hooded figure standing before me. The pressure grew. My whole body tingled, and I had the terrible sensation that he was trying to pull something out of me. Not physically, but rip something from deep inside. My vision began to darken at the edges, and a deep, vibrating hum filled my ears. Then he leaned even closer, until the void inside the hood was only inches from my face. And in that moment, I realized something terrible. The void wasn't just the absence of light. It was a mouth, a vast, silent mouth that looked ready to swallow me whole. I don't know where the strength came from. My body was still trapped, but somewhere deep inside, something screamed at me to do something, or this moment would be my last. With almost impossible effort, I managed to move my left foot. The hooded figure froze, as if it had noticed my attempt. The grip on my ankle tightened, and the cold spread up to my hip, burning from the inside. I pushed harder. My right arm shifted a few inches, just enough to reach the drawer of the nightstand. My fingers fumbled in the dark until they found a small folding knife I kept there, not as a weapon, but as a tool. The instant I touched the cold metal, a jolt shot through my hand. It was as if the hooded figure knew exactly what I was about to do. A deep, low sound came from inside the hood. Not human, more like a muffled growl mixed with a low, vibrating hum that made the air itself tremble. With the last bit of strength I had left, I flicked the blade open and raised it toward him. The cloak erupted violently. as if a powerful wind had burst to life inside the room. The void within the hood expanded, revealing more clearly that vast, silent mouth, a gaping abyss ready to swallow me whole. And then he moved. He didn't walk. He didn't leap. He was simply on top of me in an instant, as if the space between us had ceased to exist. The knife slipped from my hand, hitting the floor with a dull thud. The darkness poured out of the hood, spreading across the walls, the ceiling, and finally over my eyes. When I woke, I was lying on the floor. The bedroom was wrapped in such absolute silence that even the sound of my own heartbeat felt distant. The air was cold and still, without the slightest hint of life. The bed was tilted, as if it had been shoved violently to the side. The folding knife lay near the door, its blade closed as if it had never been used. For a moment I thought it had all been a nightmare, but then I saw the marks. On my ankle were 5 deep, parallel impressions, exactly where the hooded figure's hand had gripped me. The skin was purple, and to the touch it was so cold it felt like it no longer belonged to my body. That's when I noticed something even stranger. The digital clock on the nightstand still read 3:03, the exact time I had heard the footsteps. But from the faint light slipping through the gap in the curtains, it was already morning. I looked toward the door. It was wide open. In the hallway, the darkness was thicker than it should have been, as if daylight couldn't reach inside. And then I heard it again, that deep, muffled sound from within the hood. It wasn't in the hallway. It was in the bedroom, behind me. When I turned, there was only empty, silent space. Or maybe it was just waiting for the next time I closed my eyes. When I took the job in Chicago, I thought the worst part would be the winter. The snow, the cutting wind coming off the lake. None of that scared me. All I needed was a place to stay, and the apartment I found seemed perfect. Old, spacious, with a view of a quiet street. The price was so good I almost felt guilty accepting it. The only thing that bothered me was the hallway. Long, narrow, with a worn carpet, and walls lined with dark wood paneling. During the day, it was just gloomy, but at night, it seemed to stretch farther than it should, as if my bedroom door was several meters away, even when I was standing right in front of it. In my first week, nothing happened. I worked late and came home exhausted, collapsing into bed almost immediately. But on the 8th night, something changed. I woke suddenly, not knowing why. I looked at the clock, 2:47 a.m. The silence was absolute, except for a faint, repetitive sound, a sort of dragging, like fabric scraping against the floor. It was coming from the hallway. I got up, still half asleep, and walked to the bedroom door. The wood felt cold to the touch. I opened it slowly and saw the hallway in front of me, longer than it should have been, much longer. At the far end stood a figure. I couldn't see a face, only a thin outline, covered by a long dark coat that trailed along the floor, making that sound. It didn't move. It just stood there, facing me. I blinked, and the hallway was empty. But the sound of fabric dragging along the floor continued, closer. That same night, after closing the door and trying to go back to sleep, I realized something wasn't right. The sound had stopped, but the silence didn't feel natural. It was a heavy silence, as if the air had grown thicker, harder to breathe. I turned in bed to try and find a comfortable position. That's when I noticed I couldn't move my body. My legs were pinned, my arms pressed into the mattress. Even my breathing felt restricted, as if something invisible was pressing down on my chest. My eyes were the only part of me that still obeyed. I looked toward the bedroom door, the door I could have sworn I had closed. Now it was slightly ajar. In the gap, I saw the figure again, the same thin outline, the long coat touching the floor, motionless, me watching me. I wanted to scream, but my throat wouldn't make a sound. The figure took one slow step, the fabric dragging, then another. Each step seemed to stretch time itself, until finally it crossed into the room. I could see a little more now. The coat didn't look like ordinary fabric. It seemed heavier, almost like aged leather, and where a face should have been, there was only shadow. It stopped beside the bed, leaning forward slightly. That's when I realized the silence wasn't complete. There was a faint sound, almost imperceptible, a slow, irregular breathing, as if each inhale was a struggle. My eyes burned from trying not to blink. I knew, if I closed them, even for an instant, I might never open them again. The figure stayed bent over me long enough for me to lose all sense of time. The air felt even heavier, and each breath became a painful effort. Then it moved. Slowly, a hand emerged from inside the coat, but it wasn't a human hand. The fingers were far too long, thin and rigid, like dry branches covered by a translucent membrane. The skin, if it could be called that, was a grayish tone and seemed to faintly glimmer under the little light in the room. The touch landed directly on my arm. Cold, but not like Chicago's winter cold. This cold came from within, freezing my muscles and bones from the inside out. At the same time, I felt a strange pressure in my head. It was as if thoughts that weren't mine were trying to force their way into my mind. I saw quick, fragmented images. The same hallway in my building, but with doors open to reveal completely empty apartments, windows where pale faces appeared and vanished, and in every single vision, the figure was there, motionless, always watching me. The pressure grew stronger, and for a moment I felt my consciousness being pulled, as if something was trying to drag me out of my own body. My vision began to blur, and a deep, almost deafening hum filled my ears. Then its face, or what should have been a face, began to shift. The shadows covering it moved like smoke, revealing for a brief second something impossible to describe. It wasn't flesh, it wasn't bone, it was a living, pulsing darkness that seemed to feed on the very air I breathed. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't here to scare me. It was here to take me. I don't know where it came from, but a sudden burst of strength surged within me. It wasn't much, but enough to move my hand a few inches. I knew that if I didn't try now, I wouldn't get another chance. With painful effort, I managed to reach the pillow beside me. Underneath it, there was a small piece of iron I kept as an improvised defense. A short, heavy pipe left behind by the previous tenant. The moment my fingers touched the cold metal, the figure stopped moving. The deep hum in my ears grew louder, so strong it felt like it was vibrating inside my skull. Without thinking, I tried to lift my arm to strike it, but before I could react, the figure's coat flared violently, as if it were made of living smoke. The skeletal hand released my arm and, made in a sudden, impossible-to-follow movement, gripped my neck. The cold was immediate, sinking deep into my lungs. I tried to draw breath, but it was like trying to inhale inside a block of ice. Its face came closer. The darkness within pulsed, expanding and contracting, as if it were breathing. And in the midst of that, I noticed something horrifying. They weren't shadows, they were shapes. Bodies, small bodies, as if they were compressed remains, shifting inside that void. The pressure on my neck increased, and a single certainty burned in my mind. The rule was clear, do not touch it, and I had broken it. The pressure on my neck grew stronger, and the cold was no longer just physical. It felt like it was freezing my thoughts. The room began to darken, not like when the lights go out, but as if the very color was being drained from the walls, the floor from me. My vision blurred, and for a moment I saw something beyond the room, an endless hallway, lined with rows of open doors, each revealing an empty space except for a shadow standing in the center, watching. No matter which door I looked at, it was always there. The pressure suddenly stopped. The figure stepped back, still watching me, or at least staring through that void where its face should have been. Then it slowly tilted its head to the side, as if studying how much resistance I had left. It turned and began to walk toward the bedroom door. The coat dragged along the floor, and the sound echoed more than it should have, as if the hallway was far longer than it truly was. I tried to move, but my body refused to respond. All I could do was follow the figure with my eyes until it vanished through the door. The silence returned, but it was a silence that carried something hidden, a promise. Hours later, when I finally managed to sit up, I noticed the piece of iron was still under my pillow. I hadn't been holding it, but there were marks on it, 5 long, deep impressions, as if skeletal fingers had tried to bend the metal. I looked into the hallway. It was empty, but I knew it was still in the building, and one day it would come back to finish what it started. You can try to explain it. You can call it sleep paralysis, hallucination, or just the product of exhaustion. But what happens when 4 men in 4 different cities describe the exact same feeling? The body locked in place, the breath caught in their throat, the presence drawing closer, and the touch that leaves marks, real marks. Today, you'll hear accounts that span great distances, but share one disturbing truth. Every one of them swears it wasn't a dream. They were encounters, and all of them are still waiting for the next time they closed their eyes. Maybe you're wondering, what would happen if it were me? The answer is simple. You'll only find out when you wake up and can't move. For now, you've only heard stories, but stories have a strange way of slipping into reality. If you ever feel a weight on your chest, a creeping cold rising through your legs, or the slow sound of footsteps approaching, remember, don't open your eyes, and above all, don't touch it. If you enjoyed these stories, click the link below and uncover even deeper horrors in our exclusive ebook. Inside Worry, you'll find accounts that never made it to the internet, and maybe never should have.